reading from Genesis 12. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Abram took his wife Sarai and his brother's son Lot, and all the possessions that they had gathered, and the persons whom they had acquired in Haran. And they set forth to go to the land of Canaan. When they had come to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place at Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. At that time the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built there an altar to the Lord, who had appeared to him. From there he moved on to the hill country on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the right, on the east, and there he built an altar to the Lord, and invoked the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed on by stages towards the Negeb.
Thank you, Penny. God had given Abram and Sarai a clear and well-spoken directional command. God said, "Go." And the subtext of this conversation is, go and everything will change. I seem to recall a few others who've received the exact same message. Go, and everything will change. Remember Noah? The disciples? Jonah? Habakkuk? This is a common biblical theme. Go, and everything will change. Talk about change. God actually changes their names by the end of this story to Abraham and Sarah. And life does change when we listen to God. And when we have an encounter with the divine, life is breathed into us. When we encounter God, we are fed. We are healed, we are forgiven, renewed, reconciled, restored. Go. Every time we listen for God and every time we say yes to a new thing that God is offering us, there's the chance to discover more life than we ever imagined, more freedom than we have ever known, and more joy. This is another story about faithfulness. Abram and Sarah were not extraordinary people. They were simple. They had lived a full life already by the time they had this encounter with God. They had made mistakes, and if you listen to the story carefully, they continue to make mistakes. But God asked them to go. Take your household. They didn't just take all the camels that had the heavy fluorescent orange sticker on them. They didn't just take the servants and the tents and the flocks of sheep and goats. They took everything. They took the bad stuff too. They took their doubts and their mistakes, their personality defects. They didn't run away from God. They took it all. They packed up and they left. We come to this place too with everything. Our failures, our disappointments, our struggles, addictions, our doubts, our fears, the little parts of our story that are sad. we bring it here. When we leave home, we pack up and come exactly how we are. And I think this is how God desires to meet us. Our joy here at Mayfair Church is to live out those promises to Abram and Sarai so long ago. Because the other side of this story of faithfulness is God's faithfulness to God's people. God promised them descendants, a new home, and blessings. And our joy here at Mayfair is to share those promises with others. The promise of descendants is about the future. It's about legacy. It's about hope. And here, each and every day, we enjoy and know the blessings of God in this place. We find it in each other, in our stories, in our faith. And here at this place, we have found a home. God has indeed been faithful to us at Mayfair over and over and over again. A future, a home, and blessings. So how do we share these promises with those we know and love? Have you ever been somewhere and relied solely on GPS? Remember Kananaskis? We kept being told to go down a dead-end gravel road. Have you ever relied on an old map or your old memory? Have you ever been really, really lost? Again, I think this is where God desires to meet us. And God always offers us more than we need. We walk by faith alone. And when God says go, it also means come. God says, you shall be my people, and I will be your God. And together, we will do something wonderful. And I will be close, but get ready, because everything could change. And God may change our names too. And we could be called beloved, or we could be called those in whom I am well pleased. So when God says go, pack your things, because it's going to be a fantastic journey. Amen.
We interrupt this regularly scheduled program for a project at Mayfair United Church. Just like God called Abram and Sarai, or Sarai, depends on who you're talking to, whichever minister. God is calling us to a new thing here at Mayfair United Church, and I couldn't be more excited. In the Methodist Church of England, a number of years ago, back in '04, they developed a new idea called Back to Church Sunday. It's become an international phenomenon that Mayfair United Church is finally catching up on. Back to Church Sunday, and as you know, it's happening on September the 28th here at Mayfair, and we're connected to a bunch of United Churches across the country who are joining the Methodists and many others across the world in Back to Church Sunday. But the Methodists didn't stop there. In the last 3 years, they've piloted a project called A Season of Invitation. And those icons there are the background icons for A Season of Invitation. You can see them here on my little invitation card, envelope, church, and heart. The season is from now until Christmas, and they've invited all of us to practice inviting people to church for Back to Church Sunday, but not just then. Harvest Sunday, we call it Thanksgiving. Remembrance Sunday. Early Christmas, we're going to call that Advent. And Christmas Eve. And they've provided icons and little cards and digital files and posters and all that kind of stuff that we can make up and use as we invite. But let's start with Back to Church Sunday. It's 2 weeks from now. So I have a little exercise for all of us. The big difference, now I've invited you to invite others before. I've said to you, the Christian church has never grown except through the making of babies and the inviting of friends. The Christian church has hardly ever grown by people just walking by going, oh, I think I'll stop in. We either have to make babies, and thank you, some of you have done that. Recently. Well done. And inviting friends, and there's about 5% of you who are pathological inviters, and I thank you for that as well. But the rest of us, not so good. The difference this time, from me asking you to go invite friends to a cool thing like Paul Martin or whatever, is that we're going to ask God to help us. That gives us less wiggle room, but it also will give us great spiritual aid. This is all about one person inviting another person. It's not, and let's be clear, about filling the pews or bringing more money into our church. I couldn't care less, nor does God. This is about the invitation. It's about what happens when we invite others to join us in what God is doing at Mayfair United Church. And as Rev Deb said, God is doing a lot here already. What happens when we simply invite people to join in something that we love? Now, we might invite them to the Lions Club, or we might invite them to join our ball team or our curling team, but we haven't often invited people to join us at that other great thing that nourishes us, called church. But I know that we love what happens here. And I know that we are dedicated to what God is doing here. So today, we get to think about inviting others. So we need to make an invitation. And I want to stress that what makes this successful is the invitation. The founder of this movement has said, the success is not hearing yes, or the person showing up, or hearing no. It's none of those things. The success isn't the answer, because that answer belongs to God. Whether a person says yes or no, or shows up or doesn't, belongs to them and God only, not to us. The invitation, just making the invitation, will be what's successful. That's where God will work in our community in new and wondrous ways. So I have this little project. It's called the Acorn Exercise, invented and created by the founder of Back to Church Sunday. It's an acronym, but before we get to the acronym, the reason he chose Acorn in the first place was because for an oak tree to grow, a little acorn has to bury itself into the ground and die. That's how oak trees happen. They happen out of death of a seed called an acorn. And he chose this because he knew that for us to make an invitation to somebody, a fear usually has to be buried and die. We have to take one of our crazy little fears. Oh, they'll think we're evangelicals or Mormons. Or they might be offended because we're pushing religion on them by inviting them to church. Or we might just have to bury our shyness a little bit. Or whatever fantasy we've dreamed up that will happen when we say to a colleague, a friend, a coworker, would you like to come to church on the 28th of September? Whatever that fear is, we're going to bury them like an acorn. And I invite you to talk to each other this week about what that fear might be. Because it might be silly. The other person will say, well, that's silly. Not your most caring way to answer, but it might help. have this other fear. And then you can say, well, that's silly. And then you can bury them together. Here's what this acronym means, though. A is for ask. I love it. C is for call. O is for obey. R is for report. I messed those up, okay. They came together. Obey, report, and here's a big word. N is for numinous. Let's just talk about that for a second, because that's what this Sunday is all about. Numinous means God's activity. It means God's mysterious and wondrous movement in our lives. The numinous experience. This whole exercise, this whole Sunday, everything that happened to Abram and Sarai and us is asking and wondering and questioning, how is God moving in our lives? The numinous. You can take that home for lunch today. Numinous. Roll that out at work, not when you invite somebody. I want to invite you to church because I am interested in the numinous experience with God. I don't think that's attractive. Here's our exercise. We're going to move into a period of discernment in our church. That's the ask. Let's see that again. Next click. We're going to ask God for guidance, really and truly. We're going to have a time of silence, and as the founder of this movement said, it's the kind of silence where you'll wonder whether the person who called for the silence has fallen asleep. That's the kind of silence we're going to have. It's tricky in the United Church of Canada to ask for silence. We're a wiggly, noisy crowd. My Anglican mother used to say that often. And by silence, I really do mean silence. I don't mean no coughing or babies gurgling. That's just humanity. But I mean not talking to each other. You know? We're going to have a real period of opening prayer. We don't have to know what to say to God. We just have to ask and open ourselves for the name of somebody who God wants us to invite to church. Oh, we should have been asking God all this time. We're going to ask God to place a name in our hearts. That's the call. We're going to expect God's call to us with that name. And then we're going to do some more things. We're going to obey that call. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to obey God's nudge. When you hear God place a name in your heart, I want you to write the initials of that person on the sticky note that's in front of you. Now you know what they're for. Take that sticky note and write in initials. Now, if you don't have a name placed in your heart, and you may have one and go, oh, that's not the right person, I want you to still hold on to it for a minute. Pray about that person first before you pass them off. If you just absolutely don't get one, I want you to write a little question mark on the sticky note. Okay? Because that means you're open this week to hearing God speak to you anyway. To have a name come to you on Tuesday, just after your nap in the afternoon, or as you're getting on the bus coming home from work. God may yet speak to you. That's just the beginning of our project. I'm going to leave it there. Are you ready? Let's ask God for help, and let's take a moment and pray to see who God might be asking us to invite to church for September 28th. you doing with God? You're working it out? You and God? Impressive to sit in prayer together like that. Did you hear God's nudge? Here's the next thing I'd like you to do. It's part of the obey. I'd like you to turn to somebody, and I'd like you to tell them the first name of the person that you're going to invite to church. And you could take that moment to lift up that person's name. Tell them what you think about that. Is it crazy? Does it kind of make you giggle? What did it come out of nowhere? But I want you to share with somebody else. This is key. Who you're going to invite in the next week or so. I'd say in this week, between now and next Sunday. Who you're going to invite to church for the 28th of September. So just take a minute and turn to somebody and do that now. Go find somebody if you're not sitting near anybody. Didn't I block the Spirit? I blocked the Spirit. I didn't. I was thinking about the process. Somebody's got to. Okay. Remember, it's okay if you didn't come up with initials. Don't feel like you failed. There's no failure in this. There's only God's numinous. There's only God's activity. Listen to the Spirit in the air just as you spoke. Might be just because you were silent and you couldn't wait to speak again. But it also is the Spirit moving. This is God acting in our lives. Remember, it's not whether we hear a yes or no. It's that we make the invitation and see what happens. It's God working in us, the inviter, and God working in the other person, the invited. And you just never know. And now I'd like to take a minute, and I'd like you to bring your sticky notes forward, and we're going to paste them all over God's table of invitation. This is God's table of thanksgiving. And if you'd like, while you're up here, you could grab one of these beautiful cards. One of them, one side is who you're going to invite and all the details of our service time and a little note. The other part is for you to keep, for you to pray for that person as the next 2 weeks go on. And there's a beautiful little prayer. So come on up with your sticky notes. You could send them with somebody else if you absolutely have to. But come on up, and Warren's going to play a little movement music for us. And take a card. Listen to them. Just have to smile. We're out. I'll see if I get some next week. Thanks, Maureen. Yeah, we get some. I think like when Gabriel was playing that, they shot an arrow at him or something, didn't they? And he just stopped. You don't remember? Oh, you should watch it. Here's the part that you're going to do next week when I'm not here, but I'm going to tell Lauren Calvert so he makes sure that you know you have to do this. You're going to come back and you're going to talk to each other about how it went. That's the reporting. How did it go? This will be the really exciting part. You thought this was exciting so far. You get to talk to each other about whether it went good, bad. Well, don't even not good or bad. Just talk about it. Awkward, fun, exciting. How did God move? Now, if you didn't get a card, I'm excited by the response, just for the record, and what joy as your minister to be here when you're coming forward like that. I'm going to borrow somebody's card this week because I don't even have one myself. I'm going to borrow a card, and I'm going to get more made for you. So next week you can grab one if you haven't gotten to it yet. But I really do encourage you to try between now and next Sunday to make the invitation and to maybe I'll get some made up in the middle of this week. You can come, or if you come to Paul Martin, we'll have them here for you. And come back and tell the person you spoke to today about who it was. Tell them how it went. And just share those stories, okay? Before church, during offering, not while Lauren's preaching, but maybe just after church. And remember the numinous in all of this. Where was God in the inviting? How did it go? As they say, how's it going with God today? How did it go with God today and in the inviting? And we'll see how that happens. And I can't wait to try it again at harvest time and remembrance. And we're just going to make this a Mayfair United Church practice for this fall. I'm excited to hear about God's mystery and God's Spirit moving in our lives. And I hope you're as excited as I am. Thank you for being here today and for taking part in this. And I can't wait for the 28th to see what happens as well. Let's sing our way out of church today.